Welcome to this month's installment of the Homelessness Committee. Why don't we begin by introductions, and we'll start with you, Melinda.
Okay, Melinda Freeman, I'm the Director of Department of Health and Human Services.
Nancy Burke with the Mayor's Office. Sonia Cathino, City Prosecutor.
Wellington Assembly, Patrick Floyd.
Phil Evans.
Elfie Bridges.
Where's Dunbar?
Pete Peterson.
I think we also go around the audience. We got a big crowd, but just so we know who all's here, and if you're with a particular organization, let us know that as well.
Steve McDonald, Channel 2 News.
Chris Constant with Derby Business Association and sometimes Aquila.
Candidate for office. No, he's a candidate for office.
Also true.
Rick Davies, Chairman of the Alaska Veterans Foundation, working on Bed Village.
Aaron Waters, Alaska Workers.
Leanne Gonzalez, some of the Mayor's Office as well.
Andy Berg is at all Mayor's Office. Kurt Newman also with the Mayor's Office.
Dora Morris, also with the Mayor's Office.
Paul Wacker, Neighbor Rights. I'm Dave Barry with Anchorage Community Health Services.
Beth Wilson with the Division of Behavioral Health.
And John with
Where Jones covered Ron Alega, helping with the transition of the homeless.
And in the back, and please speak up if you can.
Charles Barbara.
Amanda with the Clerk's Office.
Susan Usante, Division of Behavioral Health, Integrated Housing.
David Pelto, citizen who lives on Campbell Park.
Walker Platzig, Alaska Zoo.
Sierra Smith, citizen with Anchorage.
Melinda Gann, Christian Development Authority. Jennifer Galbraith, Rural Cat. Ellen Kazari, Rural Cat. Cheryl Ford, Rural Cat.
Sherry Lori, Downhouse Kitchen.
Samantha Ganess, South Central Foundation. Sherry Easton, Nursing.
Well, thank you all for coming. It's a great turnout, and we're glad to see it. I guess we'll begin with number 3 on our agenda. It's the homeless program areas and events to report. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Burke.
Thank you. There are lots of activities happening around the homeless initiative, and I thought I would just give an update and then turn it over to some of our community partners who've been working with us on the project. Last 2 weeks ago, we gave an update to the mayor on the activities happening around addressing camps and helping people move into other housing situations. And just wanted to say again to the committee, we talked about it last time, that APD is very actively noticing camps in the community. I was in a meeting 2 weeks ago where we had 22 notifications that came across the table. I wanted to provide you with an update of how many they've done since we've started, and I wasn't able to get that from Acting Lieutenant Nolder before the meeting today, but I will get that and send that out to committee. It's daily. They're going weekly. They're going out. They're very aggressively noticing all of the camps, and in anticipation of the reinforcement for cleanup, which will be allocated. I believe the crews will be fully hired up soon. I understand there might be 6 people who've been hired in the new 10-member Parks and Recreation crew out of 6 out of the 10. So as soon as that team is fully up and trained, they will begin following the camp notifications with the cleanup effort. So we will begin to see a significant change in the community around cleanup, which is wonderful. The other thing that's happening is working with the service providers to continue the coordination and engagement. We're doing an effort that other communities have done called coordinated entry, and that is the same elements that we've been talking about in our initiative around making sure that we have a community list of the homeless people, understanding what their particular service needs or needs for getting back into housing and back in the community, and then just really going after that list. We have 100 people per year targeted for the mayor's initiative, and that is just the adults. We're focusing on adults first. We think we're getting closer to about 80 people housed this year from the beginning, and that's largely due to some state programs that kicked off in the fall that have been very effective in moving people from the street into housing. In the next year, we'll have to look for additional rental assistance resources and ways to help people remain housed in the community. So we're gearing up for next year, thinking about our strategy, how we might change our strategy and start working with that next group of 100 people. This movement of people out of camps has brought more people into the visual for Anchorage, and we do get calls and people are concerned that perhaps there are more homeless people in the community this year than other years. We don't have numbers to back that up necessarily, but it's anecdotally, it's my belief that we're just seeing people because they're not staying out in the camps, they're moved to the street, and in one way that makes it easier for us to find them for engagement. It's of note to the public that there are more people seemingly on the corners and on the streets. I think I've just been saying over and over again, this is the gap year. We don't quite have the housing and the resources in place to move the next batch of people into housing. So this year is going to be a frustrating summer because we have this tension between really very real concern about camps and fires catching neighborhoods and moving people, having the resources to move people into housing. So we just continue to work out the long-term solution. We have to stay focused on housing because that's the only way communities have really ended this problem rather than kind of chasing people around. So there are, I'll turn it over in just a moment to the coordinated entry project to talk about how we're going about finding people and assessing their needs and helping them move into housing. And then we have the work van project, which are these are two of the components of the resources that the Assembly approved for the initiative. So we want to make sure that you are aware of the work that's going on with the resources. And then there are some grants going out to Catholic Social Services to help us facilitate the partnership around engaging people at the shelter and providing case management and resources to move into housing. And that grant will be going out, that'll be coming up on the procurement agenda. No, I'm sorry, that one was approved, so that will be going out from the mayor's office. There are two items coming up on the agenda. One is for the work van project. It's a contract, and we're requesting a very specific service for that contract. We're looking for an entity that understands how to do homeless services and engage with the population in a almost a pre-vocational or a relearning phase of having those hard work skills to show up every day and to work on a project through the work van concept. And so we are asking for a sole source contract for that allocation of $75,000 in the Assembly packet, which will come up on the 21st. Some timing issues around that. If the Assembly members are comfortable with us engaging with a very specialized provider, which is Alaska WorkSource, is the entity that we'd like to partner with. Someone who has experience with homeless services and vocational training, that can be up for consideration on the 21st. If there's more work to be done on it, that will push us back to July 12th, which would push out the date for us to start that van project.
Ms. Burke, I think Mr. Trainee has a question.
If we approve that on the 21st, how soon did you say they could start with the van program?
I'm gonna look at my person.
Immediately. Immediately? So,
Ms. Gray Jackson.
I went to start your facility, so I understand what you've got going on there. Appreciate it.
Ms. Gray Jackson and then Mr. Steele.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want the record to show that Mr. Clough joined us when he was chair.
You said there's 75,000 is what you're targeting for a contract. What is a contractor going to have to provide? Personnel to drive the vans, I presume. But what about ownership of vans, insurance, damage?
The total project that was in our proposal to the Assembly was $100,000.
contractor's gonna be responsible for the personnel.
Correct.
They-
Oversight personnel, yes.
Please continue.
So unless there are some other questions about the initiative,
Oh, yours are done.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly again, could you describe the actual kind of work they're going to be doing?
the van project. That will be in our slide presentation, but a summary of it is helping with the camp cleanup initially. There could be other things that they do, but helping with community-focused cleanup efforts.
I don't see any other questions.
All right, then, related to the initiative, but more related to the Housing and Homeless Services Coordinator, in partnership with the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority, we've been doing this on loan configuration, and it's really been a success. I think everyone's thrilled, the response of the Assembly, the mayor's been supportive, everyone's feeling like things are going well. The trust requested that we consider the partnership go to the next level and have the transition coordinator actually belong to the municipality. It does a couple of things. It solidifies the relationship. It helps us make this a more integral part of municipal government. And on the trust side, it helps free up a PCN, a position which they were loaning out to the municipality for me to be over here, and it left them a position short. So they have approved a grant for the cost of the position to come to the municipality, and that will also be introduced in your agenda on the 21st. So just a heads up that that's it. So with that, I will turn it over to, I think Greg's gonna go first. And just by way of explanation, Greg Newman is working with us currently through a contract at the United Way, who's been a tremendous partner in this work. They've been facilitating our resources to implement the initiative, and Greg Newman comes to us through a contract with the United Way, and he's really been helping coordinate the activities that happen with the service providers around moving us to this model where everyone is at the table each week looking at the homeless list and sorting out what people need. And so Greg is going to go through some of the slides that explain the HAWK program, as he's called it, as we've called it. He's promoted it most strongly.
I'm the advocate for it, yes. Only one slide from me, and then I'll turn it over to Andy. The Housing Anchors with Care program began as the mayor's initiative, and right now we are interlacing that with the coalition's efforts to institute coordinated entry, which, if you haven't heard that term, is really kind of almost a misnomer, because coordinated entry isn't just the beginning. It carries an individual all the way through a program until they have sustainable levels of ability to retain a home. Starting off on the left-hand side, you'll see access point screening. That access point screening could happen through an outreach individual who finds the person, or it could happen through a heart form that the police initiate, that would then get funneled over to an outreach or to an actual agency directly, who would then conduct a VI SPDAT, which is a vulnerability index, and the SPDAT part is...
Service Prioritization Data Assessment Tool.
Thank you. And that's why I bring through these meetings.
Yeah.
After that VI SPDAT, and this is where something is different than what we've done in the past, we will now have not only the providing agency, a lead providing agency for that individual, but also a transition coordinator. The transition coordinator's role is to facilitate that client's transition across the entire spectrum until they get to the final end there. The client transition plan is the key to this program. Client transition plan focuses on those 4 domains that you see there, and then the subdomains. Some of you may be very familiar with Arizona's sustainability issue or program. And it's very similar to that with those domains. This is a little bit more simplified, with the intent being that the client fully understands and buys into this client transition plan, because without that buy-in, it just won't happen. So between the transition coordinator, the client, and the lead provider, they'll come up with those specific goals. And then with the agency services, and I could plural there, agency services, because very rarely will you be able to find one agency that can do it all. So coordinating those multiple agencies for that client is the transition coordinator as the agencies execute their plan, and the individual actually succeeds through that plan. There will be transition plan reviews periodically, and that may be by periodicity, or it may be by a trigger. For instance, if the individual loses their job, and we need to re-engage on maybe the other fronts, so now that the client can be successful. The intent is to then follow that client through a year until they are what we define as stable, meaning they have a home, they have the means to retain that home, and they may be having services still, but it's at a sustainable level for both the individual and the community. Now, underpinning part of this is, you'll see behind there, the landlord liaison. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Andy for in just a moment here, but the bottom line on the landlord liaison, twofold: cultivate housing opportunities, and then be that single point of contact for a landlord who hasn't had that in the past and has not always been receptive to having a client move directly out of homelessness and into one of their rooms. So that will give the landlords the peace of mind, if you will. So with that, I will turn it over to Andy to talk about landlord liaison, unless anybody has any questions of me on the entire program.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, as Greg said, I'm Andy Mergens. I'm the brand new landlord liaison. As he said, kind of a twofold aspect to what my position is to serve as an advocate for landlords, kind of a disinterested voice, to serve on their behalf. If there's any issues that resolve themselves between them and tenants, as part of the coordinated entry, sort of that holistic feel towards making sure that if there are any issues that do come up, we can address them before they become a problem, and then potentially that tenant gets back into the churn of homelessness, and we're right back where we're starting with that guy 3, 6, 8 months down the road from there. And then the second part of that is reaching out to landlords and find those who aren't necessarily aware of what we're trying to do, some of the opportunities that they have in addressing the homelessness issue, and basically bring them on board, and then offer them the incentive of my position to act as a disinterested referee for them on their behalf. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Okay, you can bring up the other slide.
So these components of having the list, having people who are working the list, the landlord liaison will be helping us identify the units, and the success, the reason that this initiative should happen, and I think will be successful, is that you really need those 3 components all at the time when you engage somebody. You need the service providers ready to go. You need to know where the housing is so people can go immediately to housing, so you can begin to start to sort out what the person needs, help them to begin to come out of the chaos of being homeless, and to get stabilized, so that then your services become more effective as you engage them in their own home instead of trying to find them on the street every day. And so these components we're placing into putting in place. Now, while Andy has some time, while the landlord liaison project is ramping up, making some contacts, it's going to be a little slow. We've asked if he wouldn't help us oversee the work van program, which is going to be part of this Housing Anchorage with Care model, and then, so this is the work part.
And before we move on, I think Mr. Green has a question.
The landlord tenant liaison, how much liability is the city going to incur if in fact we're looking for places where these people live? Is the city incurring a liability for damages done on the apartment? Do you have a legal definition of that in writing?
Not yet.
Please get it to us before we deal with this from legal. I want to make sure absolutely that legal tells us they don't have liability.
And just for clarification, the landlord liaison will be housed out of one of the nonprofits. It will be a part of our initiative, so I totally understand your point. And there is a landlord liaison project in King County that we are modeling, so we can also ask them how they did some of that.
I would appreciate knowing that, because we're all within the Ninth Circuit, and I just wanna make sure that we're legally covered in this.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where is your office? Are you on the eighth floor? You said you were in a nonprofit?
Yeah, I'm kind of floating at this point. I'm working out of Nancy's office as need be, and most of the time it's a lot of engagement at this point. It's reaching out to those landlords. There is no all-encompassing list. So we had to start from scratch and build that list and build that reputation, build that, engage that relationship with the landlords that would potentially become part of the program once we get it up and running and it's fully functional.
And long term, though, you think you'll be in this building, you yourself?
Probably not. There'll probably be another location somewhere else.
One of the things that's nice about the initiative starting up at the same time that the Homeless Coalition is doing coordinated entry is that we're able to try some things out before the community, the total plan is set. So we're learning from what we're doing, positive and negative, and then we can make the best determination for the community where the landlord liaison should sit. There's options with United Way does the 211 phone system. There's also the Homeless Coalition itself, which has a vested interest in making sure that landlords are able to house the homeless. And so there's a couple of different places where both of these positions, the one that coordinates the community outreach and activities and the landlord liaison, and there'll be transition coordinators as well. And so the coalition is really being the lead for us to help us sort out that. But in the meantime, we have a little bit of money and time to get started, and we can learn as we go.
Please proceed.
Okay, so shifting gears just a little bit. As Nancy said, I'm taking this on as we're going through the process of building the bench with the landlord liaison project. And this kind of is an outgrowth of the three-legged stool that Greg talked a little bit about. It's making sure that at each homeless client that we address and we go through this part of the project is kind of addressing those the housing issue, the work issue, and then whatever mental or physical aspects that they may need. So it's part of that holistic thing. What we're looking at, and you can see it's, if you remember Greg's slide beforehand, the housing anchorage with care, the HAWK program. We've added the I, so it's Hawkeye improvement. We're basing this on a 5-day, 5-hour per day model, and I'll get into some of the specifics on the second slide. But we're looking at, and again, still pre-decisional on some of this stuff, but the contractor will provide the operational control, supervision. He'll basically manage 90% of the aspects of this plan. We'll go out to cleanup sites that the Anchorage PD and Parks and Rec will identify. We'll vet the people who are going to be participating in the program. Obviously, they're going to have to meet certain conditions. They're going to have to be sober. They're going to have to be able to go out and perform the work. They're going to have to be able to walk on the uneven ground and out in the woods and things like that. So obviously, somebody who's wheelchair bound is not going to be able to participate in the program. And then we're looking at potentially as things that, as they develop, we're going to be able to identify a subset of this group as we go along. Certainly there will be a lot of attrition. Some people will show up for one day and that's all they're going to work. But some of the crew, as time goes by, we're going to have a percentage of that group that are consistent performers that show up all the time and do the things, and those are the ones that we're going to want to target for potential inclusion into a follow-on program if it develops into that. And then the last thing that I want to note on this particular slide is we want to concentrate on two groups essentially. The folks that are frequenting Beans Cafe and the downtown soup kitchen, and then the panhandlers that are downtown. And as we go through this process, we want to give the public an opportunity, rather than passing $10 out the window to a guy that's standing on the street corner, give that $10 to the program. And if it doesn't at least make it self-sustainable, at least it'll take some of the burden off of the taxpayers. So we'll go on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, it's a 5-day program, 5 hours a day. We've basically broken this down into 2 shifts of 15 participants. On Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, we'll concentrate on Beans in the downtown soup kitchen. 1 shift will originate from Beans in the morning, The second shift will originate from the DSK at around lunchtime. That's just based on their feeding times. Each one of those locations, Beans and the DSK, will screen the participants, again, making sure that they're sober, that they're ready to work, they're able to work, they can do all those things. And then our contractor, in this case, assuming that Alaska Work Source is the winner, will go out to Beans, to Downtown Soup Kitchen, to the Panhandler locations. I'll talk about that in a second. Pick up the shift, take them out to the work site as identified by Parks and Rec, conduct the cleanup, bring them back, and then at the end of a period of time, right now we're looking at a weekly basis, that group of participants is given a paycheck. And what we want to do is kind of instill in that group of people getting back into the habit of work ethic, showing up to work on time, performing a regular job, and then getting a payment at the end of that period of time, rather than, here's $50 in cash for the day, thanks, I'll never see you again, sort of.
I believe that Mr. Trainee has a question. Also, for the record, we've been joined by the mayor, who's more than welcome to have a seat.
I appreciate the area you want to concentrate on, but I want you to also look at Tudor Road from Piper to New Seward Highway.
Okay.
There are lots of people there with signs every single day, standing on the islands.
Sure.
We need them to be given the opportunity to work also.
Yes, sir, great
So,
segue.
if you want my approval on this and vote on it, I don't want it just to be downtown. I
No, the
want it to
lights
be
in
big.
Minnesota.
No, and that's the second part of that. So I was, like I said, great segue, thank you for that. So the second aspect of this is Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the Beans, the Downtown Soup Kitchen population. Tuesdays and Thursdays we'll concentrate on panhandlers. So the idea is to go out and identify a group of panhandlers the day prior, so that we have a list, and that's done through outreach. They go out, find a group of people that are willing to come in, they show up the next day, and then in those two shifts, they'll gather them from a central location. It could be the Fred Meyer parking lot on Northern Lights and New Seward as an example, or the location that you're talking about, wherever we think is appropriate for them to go. Pick them up, take them to the shift, they perform 5 hours worth of work, we bring them back, and then we kind of move through that.
Some people think it's just a downtown issue, but it's not. It's all
Correct.
issues.
Correct.
We need the town to understand this is everywhere.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Dunbar?
So you said they were to be given paychecks, but some of the members of the community don't have checking accounts. So are you actually gonna be giving money orders or that kind of thing, or how are you actually gonna give them?
We're looking at several different options of potentially pay them, ranging from cash, which is not the preferred method by any stretch of the imagination, to using like a gift card type setup, a prepaid debit card, or even simply cutting them a check that they could take to Walmart, take to wherever in cash. Ideally, once they get set up, and part of that financial counseling is that they get into the habit of, I'm getting a regular paycheck, I take it to a bank, I get a bank account established, I deposit it into my account, I now have a running bank total that I manage, and that's part of the counseling that, you get back into what we all do as a matter of course, that some of these folks either never have had experience with it or have been away from it for a while and just don't remember. So it's getting them back into that habit of maintaining a solid financial base.
Ms. Gray Jackson and Mr. Flynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
In terms of how you're gonna compensate them, through what source, I would highly recommend a check, because it allows you to have some really good accounting records.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're working through.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Flynn?
Mr. Dunbar and Ms. Ray Jackson are sort of stumbling into an important piece of this. Do we have any partners in the financial community, the banking community, that we are making it easy, seamless for these folks to set up accounts?
We have not yet, but that's certainly a part of it that we'll have to put into the scope of work.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel badly about paying somebody $50 and then having them go pay a $5 check cash fee. I think that's counterproductive.
Yeah, no, that's something I think we'll have to look into that too.
All right, I'll leave it for now.
Please continue.
But that's all I had, unless there are any further questions.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you. Ms. Burke?
There are a couple of highlights that I think are
partner with us. And some of the things that we wanted to do is really aggressively get an understanding of who the crowds of young people. We've heard also a lot of conversations about it's a growing teenage population. What we've been finding is that it's really kind of a 20 to 24, so it's kind of on the cusp of where we serve, but we're actively trying to engage them. Our team is going out and doing via Spadats, and we had our first group yesterday where we are going to help the city know by name who these people are, who the young people are, and what kind of services are needed. So 3 days a week at 6 a.m., our outreach team is out there to wake people up and offer them a ride to our center for a hot breakfast and a conversation about what are some of the needs. We found some alarming things. We found a 13-year-old who was running away from OCS and family. So we have found some highly vulnerable young people as we're doing this. And we're also working with the Downtown Partnership we've had now 2 of our young people hired by them. That's also helping them kind of target where people are moving to. So if you've noticed, they're really kind of moving a little bit out of downtown, and they're kind of now going on the Park Strip. And so instead of our team just naturally trying to drive them back into downtown, we're going to the Park Strip. We're having two days a week in which we have a partner with a guy who has a hot dog cart, and we're feeding them, having conversations, doing the VS Badat, really trying to figure out exactly what services, and what we're finding it's really the gaps between them. And it's also a lot of personal choice. It's beautiful weather, and it's really hard for them to think about being inside, even if we were to offer housing. Their conversation is, why would we leave this, you know? And so we're really just trying to make sure that, one, that those that are highest risk, that we're very much being attentive to and following and tracking and working with our partners, and that the others are really being responsible citizens and not doing behaviors in which anybody is at risk. So in addition to feeding, in addition to outreach, we're doing some of the things that are getting them to come back in. We've had a couple of people that we're connecting with some employment opportunities with some of our partners. So we're happy to be a part of it. And while our services for emergency shelter ends at 21, we are about to open up a long-term transitional living program that will provide services up to age 24, and that opens up with Cookend and Tribal in about 2 months. So, and that's downtown across from across from Glacier Brew House. We're turning that whole space into some long-term solutions for young people, and so we're really excited about that. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. Did I cover everything, Nancy, or is there any?
One of the things that I'm really thankful that Covenant House has been doing, and I didn't understand it very well when I started talking with Allison, is they're opening portions of their service center, that wonderful building, for other providers to come in. And could you just tell us the number of providers that are there, and then also that open engagement space that you've started?
Right. So with the changes in the downtown transit center, there was a program that was providing services for youth, AYA, that didn't have their lease renewed. And yet they also serve up to age 24, and a lot of times they provide services to someone who may not be, for behavior reasons, able to stay with us. But one of the things that we decided as a group is that we could partner with them, and we now gave them our outreach center, which is located right on our footprint, and we're allowing anyone to come into that safe space. And the beauty is that we've also helped them as an organization kind of shape some of their processes, meaning before they weren't collecting a lot of the demographics and some of the information, and now we're with them, we're helping them kind of collect all that information so that we can show some outcomes, and so we can show some progress. And any of those young people that now come in, they get all the services that Covenant House as an engagement center offer. So they can come there and they can go to our jobs program, they can come there now, they can access our computer labs, they can access our clothing closets, they can access our volunteers and some of our mentors. So it's helping expand what they were doing, but you know, it's not easy. It's two very distinct organizations, and we've had some great growing pains with it, but I think as a community we're better off when we collaborate, and so we're definitely working with them strongly to figure out how any young person has access to someone to try to help figure out services that are needed. So in addition to AYA on our footprint, we also have a substance abuse counselor from Volunteers of America. We have Anchorage Community Mental Health on our footprint. We have an Anchorage School District Classroom. We have a South Central Foundation and Cook Inlet Tribal Council, with about 51% of the kids that we serve are Alaska Native. We felt like if we could engage our partners in the space in which we know the young people are, then we would help be able to move along some of the services that the other partners can provide, and it's working. You know, the challenge is that we went from across the street and having, you know, 25 young people a night to 60 young people a night. And so as an organization, mostly privately funded, we've had many partners step up and continue to help us with this. But it's definitely something to recognize that when, you know, we create space in which services that young people need, and they come access it, that demand is, you know, threefold for us. So, but we do have real strong partners with it, and we're happy to do exactly what we set out to do 7 years ago, to create the space that would be engaging, and it's working.
Any questions? I'm glad to hear that you're working with AYA. They presented to us at our ad hoc committee over a year ago, and it seemed like a very valuable organization for their demographic. So I'm glad to hear that they found a place. That's great. Mr. Steele.
You said that the school district has a classroom there. Do they have a dedicated teacher there, or is it?
Yeah, it's a product. It's not called a Title I, but it's a transition classroom, and it's part of SAVE program.
Multi-age based on who is there?
And so any young person that comes into us, it's of school age, we really work hard to get them back to their, you know, home school. But for the young people that are not in school, or they're so far behind in credit, we recognized if we created a space and we had a dedicated teacher, that we could get those young people, you know, back on a path of education. And we graduate probably 12 to 15 kids a year out of it that had been dropped out of school since some of them as young as 14 and 15. And we work with them really hard, and we have you know, it's really what we offer is the housing stability. They can stay with us, you know, through this process. And a lot of them have been in multiple foster care systems or multiple places, and they just disengaged in education. I mean, I think, you know, our method is really, there's, you know, it's not rocket science, it's education, it's employment, and it's housing. So when you put those things together and you do the supportive transition and wellness and all those things, you get someone that you have the ability to change their life and turn it around.
And is it just school hours kind of program, or is there evening work where people can come and use the facility?
Yeah, actually, we just received an AT&T education grant with United Way, in which it will expand us from daytime to evening as well. And they're Anchorage School District employees, and then we will have employees that the Aspire, for some reason, AT&T won't contract with the school district. They'll contract with us to provide the service to the school district. So but it will increase it dramatically. And it's really going after the 90 by 2020 and really being a partner with that, and not letting these kids get off of education roles.
See the need and try to service.
Ms. Burke.
So
the things yet to learn around our youth strategies. There's a lot to support. Covenant House is our main community partner in engaging those youth and young adults. There's questions or there's things I think to think through about how the age range that Covenant House sees when you think about serving young people between 13 and 24 or 26. That is a big age range, and we can maybe have some more strategies around targeting those specific ages and needs. And so that will all roll out as we start to think about the youth homelessness. We started with the adults. You know, the youth and family pieces are coming along right behind the veterans. We're a little bit ahead of us, and so, you know, we're able to model what we're doing off of each of the specific population areas. So I wonder if Sherry Rory might want to share with us a little bit about one of the other major components that we know goes along with our initiative is access to training and economic stability, and the Downtown Soup Kitchen's been doing some really great things in that area. Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up maybe?
Sure. So, thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit. I'm Sherry Laurie, Downtown Soup Kitchen. We're changing our name right now to Downtown Soup Kitchen Hope Center because we're doing a lot more things involving more than just soup. So we still have our normal soup, showers, laundry, clothing handout. But what we've done, we partnered with Brother Francis, starting in December, and brought 30 women a night up for shelter. And what we're finding with these women, out of a traumatic environment, away from the men, they're beginning to heal and want to move back into life again, and they're hopeful for housing. So what we did was we started a bakery, and we hired a professional pastry chef. And he takes 10 women a day right now, and he's been training them to bake. We started this in March, and it has been just incredibly successful. These gals, what they're doing is they're finding gifts for themselves. They don't all want to be bakers, but one found that she really likes sales, so she's sitting down at the salmon derby doing a table with their baked goods, selling them. Another one likes to go out and, you know, to the businesses and talk to them. They just have different things that they like, but they're actually learning a skill, and they're working in community together. They're getting up every morning, showering, going in, putting their aprons on their nets, and they're baking together. And they're actually learning a job skill that they can take out. We've talked to some people that are looking for the Fred Meyer's, cars, Sam's, different bakeries around where they actually have enough skills to do that. But what's happening is we're getting a lot of contracts, and so they're in their 7 days a week baking instead of just 5 a week, which they have their, you know, life skills classes, so they go for an hour and a half every day, counseling, life skills, things like that. In the fall, we're hoping to start a culinary arts training program. When we designed the building on the corner of 3rd and Cordova, it was designed with a commercial kitchen. And so it's always been a hope to actually have a culinary arts training program. But the bakery seemed to be the first step towards that. So hopefully this fall, we'll go ahead and start a culinary arts training program. And we've been reaching out to different entities around it, you know, businesses around it, just different people we've been trying to talk to about people coming into this. That would be about 10 to 14 people, and it'll be a 14-week course. And then we've talked to several restaurants, and they're willing to take them in as prep chefs. So another thing that we want to do is get a food truck out there so we can have some of these women that are in the bakery go out actually into the community with food trucks, sell coffee, and the bakery. So we're just trying to find ways to incorporate people out there with jobs. One of the key things we right now is this housing. Several of them are ready to move into housing and actually could get a job. But so as the housing piece comes in, I think there'll be a lot of them transitioning out.
I don't see any questions. Thank you very much.
I think, unless any of the other partners down kind of talked about the work van, our outreach group is meeting every week. We're in regular contact around staying coordinated. I know ROCAP's here, and we're excited that July 1, that's one of the housing opportunities that will come online, is the housing program that'll be located in the John Thomas building. Will be able to start renting shortly after July. So that's you know, we're ready to get people to housing and looking opportunities where we can start moving folks into those units. Unless I'm forgetting something, I think that's the update on the assembly resources and the initiative and some of our partners.
It sounds like we've covered most everything. And I guess, do we have separate items for the follow-up from the prior meeting? Or is that just simply this?
We do. The first one is just that, do you want to go into those?
Yeah, we can. I'll just, logistically speaking, we have pizza here for everybody. If you're absolutely starving, if you stealthily, without creating disturbance, make your way there, that's fine. If not, as soon as we're done, please feel free to help yourself. We're done at 12:30.
This first item can just take a few minutes, and then Seneca's here to talk to us about criminal reform. These were the follow-ups from conversation from the last committee meeting that I tracked. If there are other items in the future that you want us to place on the next agenda, we can talk about how to handle that. But the first one was mentioned by Assemblymember Flynn around whether or not communities with northern climates can make an appeal to the federal government about funding for emergency resources with a stronger argument. Maybe there's a way to do that. And so I started researching this and remembered the communities that there was this one conference for Housing First where Alaska was paired with Arizona, and I thought that's a ridiculous pairing. What they do, like alphabetically, but they really did pair us as communities that have life-threatening circumstances around weather, and so the communities that have summer heat have a very pressing need right now that's probably similar to our winter climate issues. And so I did a little research online, and I did not see anything on that, but I am happy to draft a communication. I also thought it's very good timing for us as a community to bring some of our ideas along with the Homeless Coalition. The statewide coalition goes to the annual homeless conference at the end of July and typically has a meeting with the federal delegation around homeless issues. And I don't know that it's ever been done, but we might consider drafting a letter from the Assembly or from the community around our concerns about inadequate resources to handle life-saving services. And then there's also a second item that I might want to have us consider putting in a communication if the body wants to do that, around the housing trust being fully funded. The National Housing Trust has been funded. We will see funding come into the state around $3 million total. But this is the funding that comes from the proceeds of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and it is certainly within the federal government's within their ability to increase that funding so that communities have adequate resources. So you may draft something around that.
Mr. Dunbar and Mr. Flynn.
I don't want to, it was your point, Rich, so I don't want to step on it, but I thought we were going in a different direction with this point. When I saw the word climate, it sort of jumped out at me. And the reason is because the nonprofit that I've worked with, Forget Me Not, we've already served a number of primarily Alaskan natives from the northernmost villages that end up in Anchorage. And it occurs to me that when you're reaching out to the federal government, they are now treating climate change as a priority and are freeing up funds for that. I do believe that Anchorage is going to start receiving what might be considered climate refugees at some point. There are villages that are going to face, like Shishmaref, for example, they're going to face very severe challenges in the near future. And I think a good number of them are going to end up in Anchorage. And so I don't think it will in any way constitute a majority or even a very significant portion of the people who are experiencing homelessness in Anchorage. I do think it'll be some. I think it's worth at least raising when you talk to the federal delegation, to representatives from the federal administration. Sorry.
Mr. Flynn.
Yeah, just the original question was around the point in time survey, refresh everyone's memory, which is taken in the wintertime. Taken in the fall, right?
January.
And where there's looking for people out in the woods, and obviously that's when we have most people housed, because they're gonna go to a shelter because it's cold. Whereas if you're in Arizona, that's the time when you are on the street, the park strip, as it were. So we probably get a disproportionate, a skewed lower number. Is there a way to account for that? Was sort of the general question. But, we all received a letter from our junior senator this week, and I took it upon myself to call Amanda, who sent it, because I know her. She said he does have an interest in meeting with us, and I think talking about how that formula gets calculated, how it, the flow through is affected by the choice of the date, is something that we could enlist his aid on, and further just talk a little bit more about how we can leverage VA resources to help our veterans community. Sir Davidge stepped out of the room, unfortunate timing, but I think that's, she said that he'd like to have a meeting with us. I suggested that he get in touch with the chair. But those are topics I think we can take up.
Good ideas. See any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes?
How do you intend to help those with mental and physical disabilities that are homeless?
This assessment tool that we've been describing, the vulnerability index, is one that looks at medical conditions, mental health and substance use conditions, and general vulnerability on the street. And so that is the tool that helps us understand which provider to connect that person to. And of the probably 6 entities that sit around our table each week looking at the list, they all do services for people with disabilities and mental illness and substance use. So really it's a way of figuring out the right referral for that person to get them the needed resources that they need.
We're gonna hold off the questions in the audience till later. We get finished with the agenda, but then we should have plenty of time to get your questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to follow up on something that Patrick brought up. And so, if we get a count in the summer, do you think the number of campers seem to be more visible, at least in my part of the package, in the summertime? So the count, we might get an actually larger count in the summer, and that might affect the number of, or the amount of federal funding we might be able to get. So is that something we should consider as doing a semi-annual count instead of an annual count?
I think that was Senator Flynn's point, is that HUD only counts that January count. They used to have 2 counts every year. It was the last week of January and the last week of July. And now, in fact, they don't count every January, they count every other January. So they have been reducing their requirement for when the count happens. And in addition to that, they've also been narrowing the population that they will consider as part of their funding formula. So they change what it means to be chronically homeless. So HUD has been, in effect, scaling back the methodology for counting people, which means the money doesn't change.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Steele? then Mr. Crawford.
Official counts are one thing, the other is I'm hoping that everybody's doing a great job maintaining their statistics of identifying different groupings that we may need to track. This is a great program to get a holistic view as to what are issues out there, what the needs are. So I hope everybody's keeping the rule books, counting everything.
Yeah, I think I'm making a note that maybe at the next meeting, we'll go back to the metrics and see, which ones we want to really start emphasizing and front loading for the initiative, so that we will have more data when we have meetings.
And we're also really lucky in this state is that we do have the availability of partners in terms of the Native communities and VAs, I think is great program.
So we used to, when HUD considered it and or required it, do a July count and we stopped.
Correct.
But just because HUD doesn't require it, doesn't mean we can't collect the data. How much does it cost to do a count?
Really good question. I'm not sure that it would cost much. It would just be that everyone putting the time to do another count. If you remember the January count, we do the point in time, or the Project Homeless Connect, which counts people at the Egan Center. And then this January, I really felt we needed to do a very thorough canvass of the community, which was the outreach count. And, I think we could do the outreach count because we still have the phone app, we still have the volunteers interested in that information. We could do another outreach count and see how that compares to the outreach count, or we could do the whole big count again.
I'd be interested in that, both on Mr. Flynn and others' point, but just on our data measuring. I've seen so often where a federal or state requirement, a minimum if you will, then becomes the standard, then becomes in effect a maximum of all that people do. And it's not necessarily so. We would want to know, whether anyone else wants to know or not, a summer and a winter count, because it's tremendously different for us, I suspect. And secondly, I've been reading a lot about Albuquerque, and I have the same reaction you, that we must be totally different, but the more I read about it, the more maybe there are more similarities. I thought a Republican mayor there doing a lot of initiatives that seem very similar to this. Are we modeled on a lot of that? Is this approach at least partially modeled on some of the things Albuquerque's been doing?
The work van concept is completely Albuquerque. And then Utah is another. Utah is probably the most similar outreach model that we're replicating.
Using a Utah outreach and a Albuquerque, you're taking pieces from different places?
Yes.
Sounds smart.
Shamelessly.
And the work van, boy, that seems like a brilliant idea to have the homeless and pay them to help clean up. They've been doing that for how long now? I mean, do we have any results to show that it can work?
It was just 1 year. It was implemented last summer, and the mayor actually said he met that mayor in his conference last week, and is going to give us the contact information to talk with the people who implemented, so we might learn from what they learned in their first year.
Right, both on whether it'll succeed or how likely it is to, but also on things to avoid that we may.
Yes. One piece I know that we are missing, and I'm trying to figure out if we can address this, is the Albuquerque program had a place where people who were participating in the program regularly started to live, so that they are not still trying to figure out what they're doing for that night to sleep. And so that's a piece that we don't have in place yet, but we'll try to figure that out.
Both as somewhat of a reward and also a regularity so that you can be a more reliable worker.
Yeah.
Do consider that the summer, whatever, that, and it can lead into more of what you're doing, Mr. Flynn. Agitating for it when we don't have the data is one thing, collecting the data for a while and saying, see how different it is, now you need to do it.
And we can do a real simple pre-post with those folks that are in the employment program. We can see how many days they were, at, in corrections, or, we can do some pre and post work with those folks like we've done with other housing programs, and show how it helps people.
Yeah, I was looking back to the summer count, but that's true. Thank you.
Mr. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I don't want to play into negative stereotypes about the people that are experiencing homelessness, but it does sort of relate to our next point. And it's a question for the people who are handling compensation on the work van. Will that compensation be subject to wage garnishments? How do you expect to deal with that if they are?
We're gonna have to examine that. One of the things that we've looked at is that there's a $600 and some figure, I don't remember the exact number, that if they're, as long as they stay below that, they're not subject to income tax withholding. But once they break that threshold of, I think it's $640, once they meet that $640 threshold, then they're subject to income tax withholding and Social Security and all the rest of that. So the intent there is that once they become a regular participant in the program, and they've gone, and we've kind of done the numbers, it's about 12 shifts. So that works out to, if they're the 3-day model, then that's about a month's worth of time that they spent there. But if they're that mature in the program, that they will have received the financial counseling, they will have all of that stuff in place, that they can start to budget for those kinds of things. That they'll have an understanding and they can adapt to whatever they need to do. So garnishment just may be another aspect of that that we'll have to examine. But yeah, I haven't thought of wage garnishment at this point yet, so.
Mr. Weddleton, Mr. Tranny, and then Mr. Peterson.
I just wonder, have you talked to Arbra? Because they've been paying people to do this stuff for many years. I think Johan's here, somewhere out there.
I have not.
There is the opportunity to partner with, there are many community partners that do similar focus, so Arbor does clean up and they're really good at it. Assets is a nonprofit that does employment of people with disabilities. There's Goodwill Industries now in the community, and the idea of, and one of the considerations for us moving to a sole source with Alaska WorkSource is that they're a vendor with the vocational rehabilitation, so they can tap into some of those resources. They're working with the homeless population, and even really good community members like Ron Oliva do bring people in and help them work. And but having that technical piece of working with the homeless toward connecting them to long-term employment is really what Alaska WorkSources, that's their bailiwick. And then they have the 2-time recovery services as their partner in-house, so they have the recovery services that can help people address some of those issues if needed. And so this is a very specialized provider that we know will reach out to other partners in the community and make it a community project.
Well, that was a question of partnership. I just wondered, how do you pay people, Johan?
We pick them up from Beans Cafe or the rescue mission, and we pay them $8 an hour, and we give them checks. But sometimes we do give them cash because most of them don't have IDs. So if they don't have IDs, they have to no way to pay them. So cash or check.
Do you pay daily or you pay, I think,
Not really.
years?
On spot. We go and get the work done. Once the work's done, they come back to the office and pay.
Thanks.
Mr. Tranny, and then Mr. Peterson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Is the minimum wage law gonna come into this? Is it gonna impact what we do, the cost of this?
We had based it on a $10 per hour program, so if the minimum wage law changes, we could potentially have to keep that up, yeah. Which is gonna impact either the numbers that we bring in or the frequency with which we do it.
Thank you. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, I would imagine that some of these folks have had prior job experience that might be marketable. So are you gonna try to talk to them and find out, maybe they used to work as a carpenter or a meat cutter or something, and maybe you might be able to market those skills and get them a full-time.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing we're looking at, especially from as we move more into the transitional phase where they start out in kind of just the physical labor of cleaning up, picking up trash, and they demonstrate that they're coming consistently, that they're performing well, that they're a solid worker, then we'll start to cherry pick those people out and move them into a more vocational sort of program that'll start to capitalize on those skills that they may have. Or if they don't have any experience with it, but they just demonstrate a knack for, repairing drywall as an example. Do we capitalize on that and then kind of shunt them into a program that's designed or that will reinforce some of the skills that they may have?
And those skills hopefully will have been identified in the client transition plan even before they enter the Hawkeye program. So we may be able to just completely bypass that and get them right into a vocation right away.
We have a little over 20 minutes left, and I do want to save a little time for audience participation at the end, so maybe we could move into Ms. Thino's presentation on the criminal justice, the reform bill.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Seneca Thino, City Prosecutor's Office, was asked to provide sort of a quick summary of what the current crime bill, the impacts of that crime bill may have on homelessness in Anchorage. So I want to preface it by saying that nothing in the bill focuses specifically on homeless populations or homeless individuals. It's really that changes to sentencing and or pretrial release and or post-conviction release may impact everyone, and a certain percentage of our homeless populations tend to be the everyone included in the criminal population. The bill has not yet been transmitted to the governor. It is still with legislative legal going through the review and finalization process. So it has effective dates starting July 1, and yet we don't know if it will be signed by July 1. So everything is still sort of up in the air, but we do expect it to be signed once it is transmitted. So I'll just start with sort of the big things first, which are the changes to sentencing laws. And everything in the bill is focused obviously on state statutes, but there is a section in the bill that binds municipalities, specifically home rule municipalities, to have punishments equal to or less than what the state has for similar offenses. That is new. We have not been bound in that way before. So it will require significant changes to our sentencing schemes. The first is that Class A misdemeanors, which are highest level misdemeanor, which traditionally is punished by a sentence of up to 1 year in jail and up to a $10,000 fine, is now, for the majority of them, capped at 30 days of imprisonment, with a few exceptions. And those exceptions are laid out in statute. The exception applies to some crimes that have mandatory minimum penalties, some crimes including assault, indecent exposure with a minor victim, harassment, including touching of the genitals and other body parts, offenses where the defendant has been previously convicted of the same crime, and then circumstances where a jury finds this conduct is the most serious conduct of the type imagined by the offense. Those are exceptions to the 30-day limit. For those exceptions, the maximum sentence remains 365 days in jail. But for everything else that doesn't fit into that, it is now a 30-day maximum. Class B misdemeanors, which under city code are maximum 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine, are now 10 days. The Class B misdemeanors are a lot of the things that we typically expect to see from an indigent population: disorderly conduct, harassment, criminal mischief, which is property damage, indecent exposure, vehicle tampering, resisting arrest, trespass conduct, so on and so forth. So those crimes are now capped at 10 days. Thefts, Class B misdemeanor thefts, which are those under $250, have specific sentencing provisions. For your first and second conviction of theft, it is now a no jail time situation. So all that the municipality can impose is a fine. For your third and all subsequent thefts under $250, so your third or your 607, doesn't matter, the maximum penalty is 5 days of jail, all of which must be suspended, so no active time, and 6 months of probation. Like I said, and that's for all subsequent thefts. Disorderly conduct, which includes behavior like public sex, loud noise, failing to disperse, challenging others to fight, creating hazardous conditions, and spitting or transferring fluids to public servants. That is now a 24-hour maximum, again down from the 180 days. And so the way that is going to work is not only if we convict someone and they're out of custody, the maximum jail time is 24 hours, but if they're in custody on that charge pre-trial, the jail is required to release them once they hit the 24-hour mark. That's going to be a little strange because we don't actually do arraignments until 24 hours after they've been arrested, so they will be arraigned and also mandatory release simultaneously. Probation terms, and misdemeanors have informal probation. We do not have probation officers. There is no entity that is monitoring these folks to make sure that they're complying with conditions. But probation does exist, and the probation terms have been reduced. What it has been is up to 10 years. We impose any amount up to 10 years. Now it is 1 year for all misdemeanors, with the exception of person crimes, which is a 3-year max, and repeat DUI offenders, which is a 2-year max. The state is also implementing early termination of probation, which is a new system, and requires after serving your first year of probation, so if you get more than 1 year, that DOC or probation officer recommend to the court your probation be terminated. So even if we do impose up to the 3 years, so long as it is not a DV crime, you can get that terminated after 1 year and be off probation. Interestingly enough, the maximum fine for misdemeanors was increased to $25,000. I'm not sure what the premise was for that, but so our jail sentences and probation went down, our fine availability went up to $25,000. The felony threshold for property crimes increases to $1,000. So right now, it's a B misdemeanor from $0 to $250, and it is an A misdemeanor from $250 to $750. Now it will be an A misdemeanor from $250 to $1,000. And that amount will be adjusted for inflation every 5 years by the Alaska Criminal Justice Commission, and will automatically be increased if inflation has increased. So that is a new change as well. All drug possession will become an A misdemeanor. Historically, the misdemeanor was limited to drug possession of marijuana and small amounts of slightly riskier drugs. Now, all drug possession, simple possession, heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, etc., is all a Class A misdemeanor, and it is all suspended time on both a first and a second offense. Coincidentally, along with that, the treatment monitoring program that we typically use in our alcohol or drug-related cases, which is the Alcohol Safety Action Program, or ASAP, is now restricted to only monitoring individuals who are convicted of a DUI or refusal. So historically, if someone has been convicted of an assault and they were intoxicated at the time, we could refer them to ASAP, then recommend that they do alcohol treatment or be assessed. They would be assessed, they would do the treatment, and we would get monitoring of that. That is no longer an option, so if we want to impose alcohol treatment, the person has to do it on their own, and our office will have to monitor that conduct. There are a lot of other violations, things that are being reduced to violations. Failure to appear for court is no longer a crime. It is now a violation unless you're gone for more than 30 days. Violating conditions of release is now a violation as well. That is another crime that a lot of indigent folks end up potentially serving jail time on, or failures to appear or violating conditions of release. So those will no longer be jail law offenses. There's a lot of discussion publicly about pretrial services changes, bail changes. Those don't go into effect until January 1st of 2018. So we've got about a year and a half until that system changes. But basically what's going to happen is anybody who is arrested and taken to the jail will be held until their first appearance, which is up to 24 hours. They will be assessed by the Department of Corrections to determine a risk level. And then based on the risk level and recommendations by Department of Corrections, judges will set bail accordingly. There is now a presumption of unsecured bail, which means no posting of any money. It's simply a promise to pay. And that is sort of new in our system. That will be the default position, the presumption, and the court can only deviate from that and either impose monetary requirements or other restrictions based on a combination of the risk finding by DOC and the type of offense that the person has committed. So we will see a significant portion of our sort of nuisance offenders who will be released unsecured regardless of their sort of criminal history.
Mr. Flynn and then Mr. Croft and then Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, and I apologize, my memory isn't what it used to be. When we did the big reform bill for the city, the idea was to get more misdemeanors under our jurisdiction, and that realized more fine revenue. What I think I heard as a general overview of your discussion is the amount of incarceration is dropping in most instances, but the fines are either unchanged or in some cases even higher than they used to be.
The fines are all high. The maximum fine is higher than it used to be, correct? The maximum jail time is frequently lower, yes.
So I guess what I'd be curious about is how we expect this to affect the workload of the prosecutor's office and the practical effect of what we're already doing. I mean, were we pursuing sentences in excess of what is now proposed, or were we more focused on the fine side, so we're ultimately unaffected, or some blend thereof?
Through the chair, it's certainly going to be some blend thereof. I would say our office doesn't tend to focus on fines as a primary penalty for most people who are indigent. Fines may be a more appropriate penalty for those who have some means to pay. We pursue jail sentences ranging from nothing to the max that we can possibly attain. And so in some circumstances, it will certainly be limiting what we have historically done. In others, it may not affect it. In terms of workload, we're still trying to assess that. We are losing some crimes, we are gaining others, and we also have to assess the use of resources as compared to the return on investment, so to speak.
Mr. Crowe?
Seneca's good evening. Steve and I served together as municipal prosecutor. So, in hearing your presentation, I appreciate it. I'm trying to assess how our ability to treat those most serious of the offenders we see at the prosecutors. They're all misdemeanors, but domestic violence, and particularly repeat domestic violence, drunk driving, and particularly repeat drunk driving, where we would go to the limit of our ability because of the dangerousness of the conduct of the repeat nature. How much do you feel like this bill is restricting our ability? I was more worried until you said that we have the ability to go above these when it's a repeat offense. So, given that, are you concerned about it constraining our ability to treat not the run-of-the-mill offender, but the most serious?
Through the chair, there are a couple comments there. One is that the language specific for repeat conduct specifically refers to similar in nature. I don't know the legal implications of that phrase.
It's not the identical crime, it can be similar crimes.
Perhaps. And how similar it has to be, I don't know. But it is, the fact that that assault at all is excluded from the 30-day cap is very good. I'm very pleased with that. Some of the other limitations or changes do certainly give us concern. One of the reasons that we maintain long probationary periods for domestic violence offenders is because we don't always catch every instance, and it may be several years before we are able to identify a case that we can proceed with.
Now it's capped at a year.
It is capped at 3 years for people crimes, and that can't be truncated. But 3 years in our office tends to be the shortest probation term that we would offer for domestic violence offense, so now it is the maximum. In addition, for non-DV assaults, for just regular person assaults, which can be very egregious, those individuals can earn that early termination of probation credit, which means we have no ability to monitor them at all. So, we'll find ways to work through it, but there are some concerns about the impacts it's going to have on our ability to impact people extensively.
So are you guys working on an omnibus compliance revision that you'll present to us that is, here's all the things we have to do?
Yes, sir.
I'd urge you, as we do that, we have to comply with what the state did. If there are areas where what they've done, intentionally or not, is problematic for you, to point those out, so that as we can go do it, we complied with you, and here are the 5 areas where we think you're wrong, state, and we'd like you to revisit it, and here are the reasons. Thanks, Lucy.
And our last question before we get to audience participation, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, I think part of what I wanted to ask was already answered by Mr. Croft, and I appreciate that. I had a couple of little specific questions when you're going through all these numbers. You talked about the max 10 days in jail for Class B misdemeanors. And prior it was 180 days. And I know that, as you indicated, Mr. Phil, there's a wide variety of different sentences to go 0 to 180. But was it typical that we would seek 180 days on a Class B misdemeanor? I guess I could rephrase that. How frequent was it that on a Class B misdemeanor we saw 180 days in prison?
Through the chair, it's not frequent. First of all, we're prohibited by case law from imposing 180 days unless the person is considered to be a worst offender, which has legal significance, of course. We certainly have sought, I would say fairly frequently, sentences of greater than 10 days. We believe in incremental sentencing, which is every time you reoffend, you should get a slightly higher sentence. And because of that, we do have a significant population of these kinds of, who commit these kinds of offenses, who are probably in the 30, 40, 50, 60-day range, because they have so many prior convictions for the same type of conduct. But that being said, we are not regularly sentencing every person who comes through the door to jail time. In fact, we sentence a great number of people to no jail time at all.
Right, and so I guess going again off of what Mr. Croft asked, for the repeat offenders, we might still have that ability to scale up.
Not for the B misdemeanors, only on the A's.
But could the repeat offense become an A misdemeanor? Is it like, I know on DUI, for example, it can be a felony on, I believe, the third offense, so we have those strikes provisions.
Correct.
Do we have something similar to these kind of offenses?
Not for any of our B misdemeanors, no.
Okay. So again, I want to concur with what Mr. Croft said, and I think when we speak with the mayor about what our package that goes forward to the state legislature will be, when we ask them to change, I believe we start that process in November or December, or earlier even. I think this is a great place for us to have that kind of interaction. The last question I had specifically is about drug possession. You mentioned how it being a Class A misdemeanor, but I believe, I could be mistaken about this, that there are certain levels, if you're carrying a certain amount, it can be presumptive evidence or evidence towards trafficking. Is that still the case?
So through the chair, that if you possess with intent to distribute, that is still a felony. It went from an A felony down to a B or a C felony, depending on the volume that you're possessing. But the prosecution has to show intent to distribute. That can be done in certain circumstances by volume. It can be done obviously by other indicators. What we're talking about is what's considered simple possession, and it's my understanding from talking to the district attorney's office that a great volume of their possession cases, even when they suspect there are dealers, are actually handled as simple possession cases because they can't prove the dealing fact.
But they used to be Class C felonies.
They used to be higher than that.
For simple possession?
For some simple possession, yes.
And Mr. Croft has a very, very small question.
Well, a very small comment, because I know we're being deployed, and I don't want to, but for the assembly to understand the reason that this is so problematic, limiting your probation time and limiting the amount of time you can put in a sentence, often suspended, so that is, I had, when I worked there, and it ties into the homelessness issue, a case of brutal assaults in homeless camps. I mean, the homeless are both sometimes perpetrators of usually small crimes and often victims of sometimes very serious crimes. And it was very difficult to prosecute this guy because the witnesses just could not be found, right? You can't, it's, the victims and even the witnesses who were around either were intoxicated or I can't find them again. And so the tool I used eventually on that was have them plead and get out relatively light, but have a prohibition, and I added a prohibition, you can't go back to these camps. So then if I find them in the camp, or the police find them in the camp, I've got 360 or more days of suspended time, and the police officer can testify, I found this person. So probation can be a tool, and longer sentences even suspended can be a tool to protect people in odd situations. And so it may have a lot of consequences that are really harmful to public safety.
Mr. Chair, may I just want to put things in?
Sure.
Sorry. One thing I do want to point out that is a benefit that I think could benefit the indigent population as well is that correctional, the community correctional centers, the CRCs, which serve as the halfway houses, are now required to focus on treatment, substance abuse treatment, cognitive behavioral disorders, and other criminal risk factors, including aftercare support. I don't know how and when exactly they're going to institute that, but that is a benefit. That's an improvement, that there might be more treatment opportunities in the CRCs that this population can take advantage of. And I would be happy to do further briefing, more in-depth briefing on this topic for the Assembly at a future time. Just wanted to highlight the things that I think will have greatest immediate impact on this potential population.
Yeah, I think that'll be very helpful. Thank you, Christina. Before I open it up to questions from the audience, a couple reminders. First of all, for the committee members, leave your binders here. Amanda will update them, and they'll be available for you to pick up 5 days before our next committee meeting. If you are not on our list yet for emails, please let Amanda have your contact information. She'll make sure you get notified for our upcoming meetings. And when we're done here, please eat pizza. Now, very briefly, Mr. Constable.
Yeah, to the point of the concept of climate refugees that was discussed, there's at least one council I know of that has spent some substantive time discussing that. And whether it's a climate refugee scenario or an economic scenario, it's good to have scenario planning. It's a recommendation of that committee that the Assembly, the city, create a rural liaison task position focus, because it is likely that there are some shifts coming, and to be in front of it, it's good to build relationships with rural communities.
Thank you, Mr. Council. Mr. Oliva, 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds, just real quick, Guide Star reports on nonprofits. All these nonprofits should update their status. Beans Cafe, Brother Francis should not receive any money until they provide a security guard, commercial garbage pickup, and a medic. That's mandatory. Along with the Downtown Soup Kitchen, no money until they initiate a code of conduct that has to be followed before they expand any services and track the property values in their neighborhoods. So no money to Beans. Rural Cap, terrible, terrible agency, did an auction with weatherization. It was sad, the bidding process was flawed. It was a terrible situation, led to layoffs in the Fairview and Mountain View area of homeless employees. I think we should follow up with this through the chair. Don't give them any money, hold them accountable. I want to see the updates on Guide Star.
Thank you.
And get a nonprofit coordinator who's honest.
Thank you for your brevity, Ron. Anyone else, real quick? Seeing none, Ms. Gray Jackson has a final comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're going a little bit overtime, but Mr. Train and I had the opportunity to visit Teton area last week. Even though we approved,
Folks, please.
even though we approved the lease with them with the Porcupine building, I just really had no idea that they existed and what they did, and I think it's really important. Maybe some of you have been to the facility, but it's really important. Not to put you on the spot, Mr. Waters, but I really want you to, in a minute, let everybody know what your agency does, because it plays a big part in our discussion. If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Alaska WorkSource Teton is a collaborative effort between a substance abuse center and a vocational training operation. So that's what we've been doing for 10 years, helping homeless get to work. We're just happy that we've got help now with Van and the work that Nancy's doing and bringing it all together so it actually works for the community. So we're really excited that we're in the right place at the right time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. With that, we are adjourned. Please eat pizza. Excuse me.